Okay, I thought I would cover the subject of what you need to know if you're selling due to relocation. I have a few people coming through to me saying, I'm thinking about relocating outside the area or maybe going abroad. So I thought I'd come up with wee five or six top tips in order to what you need to know if you're selling due to relocation. Selling up to work abroad or in a different part of the country, well, here's what you need to know about relocating. Starting a new job in fresh surroundings can be an exciting prospect, but if you're selling your home to go, there's before you go, there's a lot to do before you can start your next adventure. Now, while you can't control exactly how long the process takes, you can reduce the chances of delays and complications. And here's the 6 top tips on how to do it. So the first one for me is actually get it in writing. Ensure you have your job contract from your future employer before you start the sale process of your property. Some employers help with relocation costs, for example. There's an allowance that they can give you, and it's tax deductible to them as well. So some employers have done that. So ask your human resources department if you're eligible for a moving allowance. Probably the second one for me is choose a good estate agent. This is crucial. I can't say this enough how important it is. And I'll say it again, we are not all the same. If we are all the same, we'd all be getting the same amounts for our properties. And we don't get that. We get a far more significant amount. And if you want me to show you examples, please contact me and I'll show you examples where within a week or within a month, the exact same property as the one we've sold it for significantly more than another agent has. And that is quite common for us to do. So you'll be flat out preparing for your new role to find a new place to live. So an experienced estate agent as well can take the control of the marketing and the viewings and the negotiation, all that for you. So it'll make it a lot less stressful in that process. The next one for me is instruct a solicitor. Now, we do that as part and parcel of our process to make it so easy for someone. And we even instruct your solicitor as well. So if you say, I've got a solicitor I use all the time, don't worry, we'll put it on the paperwork. We send them an email. As soon as we put it in our system, it automatically goes to them and we can tell them that you're ready to go. That then lets them get things like the titles ordered up in advance. They can look at the titles beforehand and then they can make sure that if there's any issues with regards to the title itself. And what I mean by the title is the boundaries exactly what you're offering? Or is there confusion maybe about a right of way? If you're in a row of terraced houses and maybe somebody's got a right of way through your garden for their bins to take them out and in, and possibly just take things round, like, if you need to go around with tools and equipment or ladders in order to work on the rear of the property because you don't have a pen going up the middle, so you have to come round the back of the property. These are the sort of things that solicitors would like to know in advance. The last thing is surprises they want. Because what happens is sometimes a lot of estate agents, and I will say a lot of estate agents because I know that for a fact, leave it to the last minute. They leave it till when the property is actually sold, and then they go to their client and they go, "Who's your solicitor?" "Oh, it's so and so." Then they spring on the solicitor and say, "By the way, we've sold the property now. It's up to you to do the conveyancing." And they go, "Wait a minute. I could have ordered the titles in advance. I could have checked if the client had a mortgage and got a surrender value and communicated with the lender just in advance as well." So these are all the things that you want to tell your solicitor in the beginning, that you're going to put your house in the market, or we can tell them as well. And then they can get the ball rolling on these issues way in advance. So when you do get that offer for sale, it can go through a lot quicker than it can. Now, this is instrumentally vital at this point in time. Let me explain why. Because the quicker you can get this over the line, the quicker you have more certainty it will get over the line. And I will explain what I mean by that. Today's announcement of 10.4% in inflation is completely unexpected for the Bank of England and the government. They expected 9.9%. Inflation has gone up and food prices have gone up even more than expected again. So they'll do everything in their power to curb inflation, which means interest rates, base rates tomorrow will be announced, a decision by the Bank of England. And I suspect it's going to go up by a percentage again. Now, no one expected that because they expected inflation to go down. So I suspect it possibly might be the case that they might actually increase it without that information, that new information that's become available. That's why it's important to get your property over the line as quick as possible once it's been sold, and get the conveyancing process and get all the mortgages sorted out and everything else in place beforehand. It's also great that your estate agent should be qualifying your buyer to make sure they've got everything in place to make it go through as quickly and smoothly as possible as well before you actually accept the offer. Let me tell you an example of this recently. We had a house at the back of East Neuk, and it was actually taken off another estate agent. They had actually had it for 3 months. And then we sold it within 3 weeks. Now, that's not the real issue here. The real story I want to tell you, though, is that same estate agent had a client who actually sold their house in St Andrews. And they came to us to buy the house that we had, and they were the ones that put the offer in. And the first thing we said to them was, okay, so you've got your house sold. What's the position of your buyer then? Oh, I don't know. What do you mean, don't know? Sure, your estate agent told you what the position of the buyer is, because you shouldn't be in a position to accept an offer for your property if your estate agent hasn't explained to you properly what the position of the buyer is. Well, I don't know. So they subsequently went back to their estate agent, asked what the buyer's position was, and the estate agent said, I don't know. Sorry? Your estate agent doesn't know the position of your buyer, and you've accepted an offer on your property? We'll not be accepting any offers on this property until we know what position your buyer's in. So, a couple of days later, actually about a week or two later, that's how long it took for them to find this out, after they had advised them to accept their offer, even though they didn't know the position of the buyer. A couple of weeks later, this was actually conveyed. The buyer now has a house to put on the market, and they have to wait and get a buyer for their house. So they're not in a position to proceed, really. And so we can't accept an offer from you if that's the case. And we'll keep our house in the market until we get a cast iron offer that we think's acceptable for the process. So then subsequently they got their house sold, and then we asked them, well, what's the position of your buyer then? And they went, well, I'm not really sure, but I'll go and check. You can see where this is going, eh? This is why not all estate agents are the same. I'll go and check. So they then checked, and subsequently their buyer didn't have their mortgage in place. So they thought, okay, so when are they going to get their mortgage in place? You'll have to advise us when they get their mortgage in place, because if they're the first people to buy your house, to buy your buyer's house, and then your buyer is then buys your house, we have to know in the very beginning if that person is in a position to proceed, because the person that's the weakest link in the chain will make sure the transaction doesn't go through at all. So it took us 2 or 3 weeks to actually get that over the line. But what I'm trying to explain to you is not all estate agents are the same, and not all estate agents qualify the buyers, and not all estate agents go down the chain from other estate agents and find out exactly what the position of the other buyers are. So we know the chain will be fully intact and everything will go through because everything's in place. Hopefully that's explained that properly. The next one for me, that's why it's important to get a solicitor and make sure you qualify that process as well. Next one for me is number 4, is get your property ready. I mean, don't mess about. Blitz the clutter and ensure your home is clean and bright. That's all I can say on that. There's loads and loads of videos on our YouTube channel, over 150 videos. There is ones on cleaning, spring cleaning, on decluttering and everything like that. And I think we'll be doing a show this week on Saturday morning for that exact same subject. So tune in Saturday morning at 9:30 and we'll be doing a show on getting your house ready for spring. The 5th one for me is negotiations. Discuss timeframes with your agents so they understand your goals. They'll be able to advise you if you're realistic in your expectations, and ask your agent to identify buyers we can move quickly. Cash or first-time buyers might be ideal. It's important when somebody says they're a cash buyer as well, you immediately go back to your estate agent and say, okay, so is that cash as in cash in the bank, or is that cash as in cash in the bank and mortgage? Or is that cash, as in I've got my house sold waiting to go through, so I will get cash for it, and then I'll be able to put some cash towards it? Because a lot of people misinterpret that, what that means, what a cash buyer is. That's the different scenarios that some people actually pick up on the cash buyer. As far as I'm concerned, if you're a cash buyer, you have money in the bank ready to go, cash. And then what I'll do is I'll go to your solicitor as well, and I'll qualify you with your solicitor if that is in fact the case that you've told me. So that's why it's important to understand that process and qualify your buyers. If your estate agent isn't doing that, you need to ask them to do that for you to make sure it goes through. It's all very well and great and saying to yourself, oh, we've got my house sold, but your house more than likely won't conclude when it's meant to. In other words, exchange contracts and money handed over, or it might not conclude at all because maybe it's a mortgage they're meant to get, interest rates have risen, and therefore they no longer can afford it. And then 2 months down the line, when you're about to exchange, so that's what solicitors do, they leave it to the last minute to do the conclusion of missives, in other words, to strike the bargain before they actually exchange money and keys. They leave it till the last minute because they've got a whole load of things to work out in between, and then that's when you find out when it comes to the wire that the buyer can no longer proceed. So that's why it's important to make sure your buyer's qualified. Okay, the final one for me is be flexible. It's unlikely you'll complete by your start date of your job. If it's unlikely that you'll complete by the start date of your job, you'll need to make other arrangements, such as staying with friends or in a hotel. Now, while you may incur costs doing this, it might be worth it if you achieve a significantly higher sale price by holding out for that person. If you don't, if you have a couple of people interested in your property, and that is entirely possible still, because we've been going to closing dates recently and actually had people miss out on properties. If you've watched my weekly update on Sunday there just now, so that's been happening last week, you'll find possibly that the cost of waiting and maybe choosing a buyer that maybe offers less than what the other buyer was going to offer, the cost of waiting might actually be less than the extra you're going to get for waiting out for the other buyer, which has a higher price point. It might be the other way around, but again, you can work that out for yourself. And that's it, guys. Hopefully that's given you a good insight into what you should be doing and what you need to know if you're selling due to a relocation or just selling in general, to be honest, because there's a lot of good top tips in there for people. It could be just selling in general and not necessarily selling due to a relocation. And that's it. Until next time, guys, I'm Jim Parker for Fife Properties TV.